is Patricia Kathleen, and this series features interviews and conversations I conduct with experts from medicine and science to health and humanitarian arenas in an effort to explore the world of fasting from a variety of angles. This dialogue is meant to develop a more complete story about the information, research, personal stories, and culture in and around the science and lifestyle of fasting. If you're enjoying this podcast, be sure to check out our subsequent series that dive deep into specific areas such as founders and entrepreneurs, vegan life, and roundtable topics. They can be found on our website, patriciakathleen.com, where you can also join our newsletter. You can also subscribe to all of our series on iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, Podbean, and YouTube. Thanks for listening. Now let's start the conversation. Hi, everyone, and welcome back. I am your host, Patricia, and today I am elated to be sitting down with Adam Martin. Adam is an exercise physiologist, weight loss specialist, fasting coach, and author. You can find out more on his website about everything we talk about today on his website, thenobreakfastguy.com. Welcome, Adam.
Thank you so much for having me on.
Absolutely. I'm excited to unpack everything. We're going to climb through Adam's book and a lot of his core principles, and we are also going to get to everyone's favorite part of the show, which is our rapid fire questions, where we take questions that all of you guys have written into us, looking for people in Adam's expertise to answer. So my crew and I have congratulated him and everything he's done by asking and formulating all of these questions. It's going to be fantastic. But before I get to that, for everyone who's new to the show, I will read a quick bio on Adam to give you kind of a platform of where he's coming from before I ask him to go further into that. Before I do that, however, a roadmap for today's podcast and the line of inquiry that we're going to be following. As I said, I'll first have Adam describe the personal and professional, his academic story as it pertains to fasting and his narrative therein. Then I'll ask him to define some terms. These all vary for us, and I think it's best to know how he himself defines terms that we all find rote in the community. However, everyone tends to come at them a different way. After we do that, I'll turn to the core tenets of his Start Late, Stay Light. I'll talk to him about the audience that he was thinking of as he wrote it, as well as some of the core philosophies and structures behind it. And then we'll turn to, as I said, the rapid fire questions from our audience. And after that, we'll wrap everything up with key pieces of advice that Adam may have for those of you who are looking to contact him or get involved, perhaps emulate some of what he's doing. As promised, a quick bio on Adam. Adam Martin is commonly known and referred to as the No Breakfast Guy. He's an Amazon best-selling author with his book, Start Late, Stay Light, and has been practicing exercise physiologist for the past 15 years. Over the past decade and a half, his successful exercise physiology clinic has helped thousands of people, from Olympic athletes to returning war veterans, recover from major injuries and surgery to return to normal and help them live their best life. 5 years ago, Adam became interested in the world of fasting, in particular, the Great Breakfast Myth, and after extensive research, authored Start Late, Stay Light, and has since helped people all over the world by introducing the no breakfast lifestyle into their eating routines and free themselves from the idea that breakfast is the most important meal of the day. I know we're going to get into that as we unpack your book as well, Adam, but before we get to that, I'm hoping you can kind of draw a narrative as to what your career trajectory and academic and personal kind of encounter was with fasting prior to writing your book and launching this philosophy of your no breakfast guy.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, as you kind of alluded to, for 15 plus years now, I've been an exercise physiologist. And so most of my career was actually around, as you said, kind of helping people kind of come back from injuries, and whether that be an Olympic athlete, the weekend warrior, mum of 2 kids, or a returning war vet. That was kind of my mainstay for a very long time. And it wasn't really until about 5 years ago where my sister's health was deteriorating at a rapid rate due to her struggles with obesity. And I understand fat loss and obesity is an issue around the world, but it wasn't my passion. It wasn't where my kind of interests lie. But my mother gave me a call one day and said, "Look, you've got to help my daughter, your sister out. Something's got to change with her," kind of thing. And so I said, "Look, she just has to eat less and move more." Just very simply, like I don't know how else to kind of help her out. But Mum was like, no, something different has to be said than just that. And I could hear a different tone in her voice than I had heard before when we say, look, I think Sarah needs to lose some weight here, kind of thing. And so I took it upon myself then to just do a little bit of research on how could I better help than just tell her eat less and move more, which is kind of, I guess, the normal narrative that kind of you hear so much these days. And just in that, I kind of came around the world of fasting throughout my research there. And I'd always been and had told all my clients up until that point of the message of breakfast is the most important meal of the day. You must start the day with that. If you're not, you're much more likely to be overweight. You're not setting yourself up with enough energy and all those different things that we do here around that kind of myth that breakfast being that most important meal of the day. And so it just interested me from a standpoint. It was something completely different to what I'd ever come across for my entire career, my academic life in university, and kind of just all of that kind of story that had been told to me my entire life. And so I thought, just out of interest, I'll kind of go down that rabbit hole and see what was there. And so in that rabbit hole, I came across a couple of different ideas, and there was 5-2, which Mike Mosley was kind of the guy at the time. He's from the UK. He's a doctor in the UK. So I thought, oh, what's this 5-2? And oh, that's interesting. He's telling people not to eat a whole lot for 2 days and then eating normal on other days. And then going further into that, came around the world of breakfast might not be the most important meal of the day. And that's what really grabbed me, this idea of kind of going without food for a whole day, twice a week, and then having, in quote, normal eating for 5 other days. That just didn't seem sustainable to someone like my sister. And I just thought my sister was probably the general population of people who are having issues with obesity, and that telling them to go without food for an entire day was kind of just something that might be too foreign for them. But this idea of just kind of getting rid of the morning meal, it seems more sustainable should there be something that was of interest to it. And so when I went down that kind of idea that breakfast might not be the most important of the day, and looking at some research that was being done and kind of some of the stories that were being told, I then came around where that kind of idea came from. And as soon as I found that out, I was like, hang on. If the guy who invented breakfast, Dr. John Harvey Kellogg's, was the guy who invented the idea that breakfast is the most important meal of the day, well, of course he's going to say that, because he's trying to sell a product that is a breakfast cereal. So I then kind of thought, okay, there's more to this. Let me kind of find out more about where that all came from. And so I guess that was kind of my entry into the world of fasting. And I then, on that day myself, just said, I'll give this a go myself. I'm a scientist. I like to kind of test my hypothesis. It's not just here, do this. And so I started doing it myself. And actually, I'm not as hungry as I thought I would be. I'm not going to die. I'm not losing all my energy. I'm not losing any mental clarity, all these different things that you hear that if you miss it, this is what's going to happen. So I just suggested it to my sister and said, look, Mum said that we've got to try and help you out with your weight. You're clearly a bit unhappy at the moment. You want to try and change some things going around. Your health is deteriorating. Let's try this. And she was like, all right, what else? I've tried everything else, so why not? So it was good to see that everything else in the past that she had tried, and for many people out there, a week in, 2 weeks, or whatever it might be, they jump off the wagon and it's unsustainable. I don't want to do this anymore. I'm not seeing results. But in 2 weeks' time, I hadn't heard from my sister to say, this is garbage, I want to get off this. So I just gave her a call and said, how you going? She goes, yeah, great. I'm down a couple of kilos and I'm feeling all right. But, this is what always happens. And in another week or two, I'll probably feel that this isn't. But again, another 2 weeks went by, another month went by, a couple of months went by, and keeping in close contact with her over that time, she just kept on losing weight and she was feeling better, and this whole no breakfast thing was really working well for her. I thought, this is great. And at that time, I was talking to clients in my clinic who have nothing to do, as I said, had nothing to do with weight loss. But a lot of these clients might kind of just have, I could probably lose a couple of kilos. And because I was talking about my sister, they're like, oh, that sounds great. Should I give it a go? And so I thought, why not? And so I was kind of almost creating my own kind of little case study kind of report of clients and my sister and things like that. And to kind of wrap that all up, about a year later, my sister had lost over 35 kilos. My mum then jumped onto that to kind of help support her. Mum lost 25 kilos, and then clients after client after client were losing weight and feeling good. I'm not someone who needs to lose weight, but I felt very energetic and I felt great. And this whole no breakfast idea that had been, the whole breakfast is the most important meal of the day kind of idea that I've been told my whole life was showing out to just be completely false in my own kind of little world of people who I started doing it with, plus myself. And so I thought, there's something a bit more to this. And someone just randomly said, one of my clients said, you should write a book about this. And if you talk to my year 12 English teacher, my final year in, they would say that I was the last person to ever write a book because my English skills are terrible. I've got terrible grammar and my kind of writing capability was terrible. But I thought, why not? Maybe I can put this story together and kind of, go a little bit deeper in the world of fasting. And so I then went deep into it after that. And yeah, as you said, I wrote my book, and I wrote it purely just to kind of put together something that my sister could hang on to and like, this is what you've done so far and this is how well you've done. That's all I basically kind of did it for. I didn't mean it to kind of then be sold around the world, but I kind of came around the world of being able to kind of find a publisher. And when we pitched the idea and the publisher said, I love the idea, let's do it. And we put it up as just as an Amazon book from sale there. And it became an Amazon bestseller and kind of really launched me into this world as kind of being a fat loss specialist. And it was certainly nothing I anticipated that my career would go to. And I still run my exercise physiology clinic, but I tend to deal a lot more these days with referrals from GPs coming with type 2 diabetes, obesity, and different conditions around that. I still see, obviously, people coming back from injuries and that kind of side of it, but a lot more of my career now is spent helping people lose weight and introducing the idea that breakfast isn't the most important meal of the day and how it might be able to help you kind of attain the results and kind of feel better and live a better life.
Nice. Yeah, let's climb into it. You kind of dropped us into some terms I want to get into. First of all, when you are encouraging people to skip breakfast, it feels like you're already kind of introducing what's called like a 16-8 or an 18. You're introducing this idea of elongating the natural fast, which is when we go to sleep at night. And I'm wondering if you knew that when you came to it, or was it just kind of like breakfast seems like the most opportunistic meal to skip? I mean, you said you came into, wondering who even said. I think largely we could look at our food and wonder how much of it marketing has actually fulfilled, this idea of what we really think we need in this world. And breakfast as the most important meal of the day certainly is the champion of that. But I'm wondering if you identify it as a completely separate category, or if you do tend to get into moments of a 16-8 where you're fasting for 16 hours and eating for a chunk of 8, or if you don't look at it that way, and how your book introduces these cycles.
I think in the beginning, a lot of people like rules. Like we like to kind of have something that we can kind of work by and a framework that we can kind of go by. And I think having some sort of framework that says these amount of hours, be that 16-8, 18-6, or whatever it might be, can work for people in the beginning. But what I started to find when I was giving that as a kind of guideline for people, in that they were sitting there watching the clock at 11:59 and thinking, okay, I can't eat until 12, and now at 12 I can eat, and kind of being too hell bent on just kind of following the time and kind of getting away from the idea of just listening to your body more. I think this day and age, because we have so readily available access to food and anything really that we want at any point in time, we've lost that ability to kind of really listen to ourselves and go, well, am I actually hungry? Yes, I'm doing this 18-6, and that means I should be eating at 12 o'clock because I stopped eating at a certain time last night. I don't think that just because it's 12 o'clock doesn't mean that you have to eat. Just because you can do something doesn't mean you have to do something. And so I got away from the idea of kind of putting a timeline on it and kind of trying to help educate people and kind of what is true hunger. And you're not going to die, and it's not the world's ending kind of problem if you do feel hungry. That we go through these natural cycles where our hormones are going to tell us that we are hungry, but that doesn't mean that we have to race out and get something straight away. And so hunger is something that, and I use this kind of analogy all the time, is hunger comes in waves, just like waves roll into the beach, in that just because you start feeling hungry, hunger doesn't just keep building. And if anyone's done an extended fast, be that 24 or 48 or beyond, you understand that these waves happen, and they're very tied into our kind of rhythms of life, both circadian rhythms and kind of our usual eating habits. And so most people can probably kind of relate and say, look, around 12 o'clock, 7 o'clock at night, and then in the morning, if they are a breakfast eater, they have these spikes of hunger. And that's just because of our hormones, but they're very easy to change. And only over a very short period of time, whether that be a week to kind of 2 weeks, people can change those kind of hormone regulations and kind of how they happen in their body quite easily. And you'll find that those hunger cues that we have at lunchtime or dinner time can very quickly kind of be put out completely different. If you start to just now listen to your body as a true, am I truly hungry, or am I just bored at the moment? Or have I just been on a big run and I'm just actually hungry because I've just done a big bout of exercise, or whatever it might be? We can actually start tapping into that rather than just time. And so the idea of no breakfast is just skip the morning meal. And then when are you next hungry? Is that at 10:30 today because you had a really busy day and you ran a marathon yesterday? Maybe you're going to be a bit hungry earlier, but maybe you had a complete quiet day yesterday. And obviously in the world we're now with COVID going around and we're a lot more sedentary at the moment, I'm finding a lot of my clients aren't eating now until 3 or 4 o'clock in the afternoon because they're just not hungry because we're not moving as much. And so I get away from the idea, to answer your question, of time and just, skip the morning meal. It's not important, and just eat when you are next hungry.
So in that, are there tools that you give your clients or that you advise when and to help them identify hunger as opposed to thirst, like you're talking about, as opposed to boredom? Do you have techniques and tips and tricks? How do you get into tapping into what true hunger is?
I kind of give it that 5-minute rule. I know the kind of age-old saying, the 5-second rule: if you drop something on the floor, pick it up quick enough, kind of thing. So it's just that kind of, if you do feel that kind of urge of, I think I could eat something now, put that to the test for 5 minutes. So have a glass of water and go and get yourself distracted by doing something else, whatever that might be. If you're currently working at your computer, get away from your computer and go and take the dog for a walk around the block. Or if you're, whatever you might be doing, you're watching TV, maybe it's something to do with, you've just seen an ad for your favorite chocolate bar and it's just sparked something in your head that, I could eat something, whatever it kind of might be. Just distract yourself from that situation for a couple of minutes. Have a glass of water. If after 5 minutes you are still hungry and you've distracted yourself from that scenario, then sure, maybe you are actually more so truly physically hungry rather than just emotionally hungry. And then at that point, maybe kind of look at having something, depending on kind of where you are and what you're kind of doing, kind of fulfilling that need at that point.
How often do you find that clients that you have that you refer to kind of skipping breakfast and seeing how they feel go on to say that they've continued to skip more and go on to this like, I've skipped breakfast and lunch some days, like it kind of encourages itself?
With the message, I, in the beginning, when kind of doing more around the kind of idea of 16 and 8 and having very strict rules around time, I found that people kind of stuck to those rules because they were kind of rules that they governed their life by, kind of thing, and they wouldn't go and just start extending that fast or kind of flirting with the idea of maybe going into OMAD, one meal a day and different things like that. But with the idea of telling people just skip the morning meal and eat when you are next hungry, and using some of those keys that we just spoke about before, I find that a lot of people, most of my clients, will have different parts of their life. And obviously that depends on how stressed they are at work or what's going on at home, and just have different ways. And most of them will say that, each day isn't the same. It's not like every single day at 12 o'clock I'm eating lunch. It's just, it kind of fluctuates from day to day. And a lot of them will, if they're having a very busy day at work and they're kind of sat at the computer all day, we'll get to the end of the day and just realize, I haven't eaten anything today, and I've just kept myself nice and productive, and it's now dinner time, so I'll get ready for dinner. So I do find that without as strict rules around it, that most people tend to float between kind of having 1 or 2 meals a day, and it just suits them better to kind of, I guess, their life for that particular day.
Do you find a difference between because you're still working with clients, do you find a difference between men versus women? Is it just more of an age group? Are there any key factors that kind of differentiate different clients and how they perform with skipping breakfast?
Not particularly between genders. I haven't found a whole heap of difference between men and women. I will say though, women, depending on where they are in their cycle, it will certainly definitely play a role into that. So as they're coming into having their period, that I will definitely find a lot of clients, and I'm very open with my clients, and I say that from the very beginning. I need to know when these things are going on. Like, I'm just like your doctor. Like, you wouldn't go to a doctor and just go completely away and say, I don't want to tell you about any of my kind of, things that are going on in the background. So, I have a very open relationship with a lot of my clients. And so I find that, with females, especially, that just around that time when a period is coming on, that they tend to find themselves feeling more hungry more often. And I'm completely okay with that. And I work that into, their program that we might be doing, whether that's around their training or around their eating, in that kind of banking in some extra food around that time and allowing for that over a kind of month cycle. And understand and educating them and letting them understand that, this is normal. You should be feeling hungry at this time. And we're going to back off your training because you're going to probably feel a little less kind of inclined to want to exercise at a high intensity. But then in about a week to 2 weeks time, you'll feel less hungry again, but you'll feel much more productive and you'll want to have more energy and all those. So we just work that all into there. But on a whole, there's not a whole lot of difference I've found between men and women. And so, yeah, I just kind of gauge that client by client, really.
Nice, interesting. Yeah, there's a doctor based out of the San Francisco area in California, in the United States, called Dr. Mindy Peltz, and she speaks in depth to the hormone fluctuation around a woman's cycle, as well as she approaches menopause, different times in her life, and the different forms of fasting that can inhibit or prohibit, a lot of different benefits of it. So that's interesting. And you're the first person that I've heard that's kind of incorporated that into his advisory work, which I think should be looked at by a lot of people. We're going to move into our rapid fire questions. We have a lot of people who really want exercise physiologists and weight loss specialists to kind of answer these questions themselves. So I will just go ahead and post these to you. What kinds of fasting have you yourself tried? And if you do go beyond the no breakfast, which kinds do you prefer to like incorporate on a monthly or yearly basis?
So I've tried pretty much all of them. So if you've read about it, I've probably given it a go. I tried skipping dinner and kind of the more circadian rhythm type fasting lifestyle, looking at the 5-2, obviously having a very restricted calorie day, which technically isn't fasting because you are still eating something, but they still, kind of wrap it up in the kind of fasting world. Obviously the whole no breakfast and skipping it, but then moving into also OMAD, so 1 meal a day, and basically just stacking all of your calories into one meal, and that's usually around dinner time. And then I've also flirted with, extended fasting. So my longest fast to date is 60 hours. And I, on my own podcast, interviewed some guys who did a 40-day fast, of one of which was 20 days with no food whatsoever. And then they moved into 20 days of only juicing and fruit and things like that. But then one of those guys actually went on to do a 40-day no food fast, which is extremely kind of extreme on that end of the scale. And I certainly, I'll say very openly here that I don't think that is something I would ever advise to anyone, not necessarily for any reason other than there's just no need to do it. I don't think you need to go through that kind of suffering to kind of get some of the benefits that they were proposing would come from that. But certainly I think a 2 or 3 day fast is something that a lot of us can benefit from a mental standpoint. There's definitely some physiological benefits that, they're starting to research on. And I don't want to sit here and say I'm someone who would be giving, clarity on what that research is. I'm certainly looking at it and kind of trying to understand it myself, but there's far better people out there that can kind of talk to the physiological benefits that might be coming from, an extended 2 or 3 day fast. But personally, I certainly try and do one of those, maybe every, I'd say couple of months, every quarter or so, just as kind of, as I said, for me, as a mental kind of reset. Sometimes it can just be, I'm just getting into life and it's just kind of, I'm just a bit busy and hectic and I just kind of need one big reset. It's a really good place to kind of put me mentally, because going 2 or 3 days without food, it's not easy. There's certainly times in that it gets very challenging, but I think challenging yourself and doing things that do put you out of your comfort zone, I think in all aspects, whether that's fasting or whether that's, trying to do your first marathon or whatever it kind of might be, I think is always a very good thing, not only physiologically, but I'm certainly looking much more these days to the kind of mental health benefits that can play out, and whether that can then help someone have a physical benefit because of the mental benefits it has. So, I think myself, I've certainly tried most of them and I certainly recommend them to a lot of my clients as well. And so, yeah.
So, really quickly, we didn't go over it. Do you consider fasting a fasted state to be juicing? It's largely accepted in the United States when we talk in the fasting communities that if you're consuming calories, you're not in a fasted state. But you mentioned, people doing juice fasting and things like that. What is fasting to you?
I'm with you there. It shouldn't include any calories. So and I know people sit there, if it's under 50 calories, there's no insulin response, therefore you're still in a fasted state and things like that. But I go to the letter of the law. Like, if fasting is 0 calories, and so I even go to the point of no coffee. I know black coffee and herbal teas and things like that, they say have no calories. They say no calories, but they are still minimal calories. And so purely when I am in a fasted state, I am in a completely fasted state, and water is the only thing that I will have. But again, there's grey areas, and people can kind of play with that grey area however they like. And at the end of the day, it's kind of what works best for you. If that means you need to have a black coffee because you want that boost from caffeine or whatever it might be, then so be it. But yeah, personally, I'm 0 calories is the fastest state. Anything else, no, you're not technically fasting.
Okay. What are some of the misconceptions, the most common misconceptions that you run into that people have regarding skipping meals or fasting?
Around skipping breakfast, it has to be, I hear all the time, but I will die. I will absolutely starve if I don't have the morning meal. And I always just kind of just go back to the point is, like, if I have a gun to your head and said, you don't eat today, I guarantee you'll get to lunchtime or beyond, because there's a far bigger consequence to you not having that meal. Whereas if you just don't skip a meal, you just feel there's no real consequence if I have something in the morning. And so people like to catastrophize that kind of idea that if I skip that morning meal. But I find very quickly with most people who are open to the idea, like, people might come and go, Adam, I'm a bit nervous about this and kind of skipping breakfast. I've eaten it my whole life. And normally when I get to the office at 9 o'clock, I'm very hungry. I understand that idea. And if it's been something that you've done for your entire life, if you're 30, 40, 50, 60 years of age, and you're only coming to this idea of skipping breakfast now, yeah, of course, those first few days, maybe first week or first couple of weeks might be challenging. But as I said earlier on in this podcast, is that our hormone regulation is something that we can manipulate quite easily. And the hunger hormone is definitely one of those ones we can manipulate quite easily. And so I find that most clients lose that misconception very quickly once they give it a try. So that's definitely the main misconception. And the other one is that there's been too many correlation-based studies, which are on the bottom run of kind of studies. Yes, they serve a purpose, but correlation isn't causation. And so too many studies have been done, say, here's a population of overweight people, and then they survey them, are you someone who skips breakfast? And a lot of them tend to do actions that are unhealthy for them, be that not exercise much, they might smoke, they might drink, and all these other things, plus they don't eat breakfast. And so they go, breakfast was the reason why you're overweight. And so that's the correlation they're making. And so a lot of misconceptions around that is that if you skip breakfast, that you're much more likely to be overweight, which is just not the case. And so that's another one that I hear all the time, but very quickly dispel when people kind of come to me and they start losing weight and seeing results. And like, oh my God, I was told that I would, my body would store, body fat if I didn't have breakfast. And so that's probably the two biggest ones and two biggest kickbacks I get from it when people are starting out in this kind of world.
Absolutely. A lot of people wanted to know from someone of your expertise and background. There's a lot of there are a lot of athletes that receive great deal of benefit in recovery from extreme sports, distance runners and things like that, particularly that I've spoken with that have come to fasting for some of the repairing and healing properties in fasted states with autophagy or anti-inflammatory measurements from even 2, 3, 4 day fasts. For you personally, what is the greatest health benefit that someone receives from fasting outside of weight loss?
I kind of alluded to it before, but I'm really going into the world of kind of the mental health. I think mental health is a huge issue around the world these days. And I can only talk to the statistics in Australia, but 8 men in particular, it's about 10 people per day, but 8 men per day commit suicide in Australia every single day. And that's just it's a number that just shouldn't exist. And so I'm not saying that skipping breakfast and fasting is going to solve that issue, but I'm very interested in kind of how mentally we can help people. And I think fasting, because it is a challenge, and as I said, a challenge that is, it's kind of the word I can use best, is it's it's a challenge that isn't a stress to the body that, we already have these days. We already live very stressful lives, and we're kind of surrounded by stressful things going on all the time. But I think if you're kind of acutely stressing yourself in a guided way, I think that that can be a very big benefit to you. And it can certainly start to focus your mind away from other areas that you might be kind of, dealing with at that particular time. And so I've certainly found that the mental health benefits for people, right from people who are, might be going through some depressive states or anxiety issues or things like that. Again, this is not a cure, and I really want to kind of be out upfront with that, and kind of, I don't want someone who's sitting there who's depressed at the moment. Cool, I'll just start skipping breakfast and that'll cure me from my depression. That's not the case, but I certainly think that there's some benefits to the mental health kind of aspect of our health that go far beyond weight loss. And I tend to find that people who are having issues with weight loss and who, have big issues, obesity, 20, 30, 40, 50 kilos overweight, there's usually some sort of mental health issue that's kind of tapped alongside that, whatever that might be. And so if I kind of get away from the idea of you just need to lose weight, and we kind of get back into the world of like, why are you unhappy? Why are you making these decisions around your health and well-being that don't make you happy? And let's talk about that mental health, and let's clear your mind. Let's get you kind of more focused on something else. It tends to flow onto having a flow-on effect of helping with fat loss anyway. And so, I'm really starting to do myself, but also work with that mental health space.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's an uncharted territory as of yet as well. And getting weight loss is always fun for people to focus on with any new thing, but definitely, and it's used for thousands of years with philosophers and people. The mental aspect, as people who listen to this podcast, is the reason why I came to fasting as a bit of an academic junkie and always looking for that mental clarity edge and things like that. Fasting has always been tossed around, and it's just got a time-tested stamp on it. And if it's used right, I think it's better than any cup of coffee or possible horrific drug or chemical that you can put in your body to kind of really clarify the brain's activities and things like that.
Couldn't agree more.
We had a lot of people that have written in about resources that you look towards. So websites, even people who are, influencers, doctors, boards, different expos, conventions. Where do you kind of go to glean your current information and kind of stay current with the fasting community?
I'm probably going to be a bit off topic for you on that question, in that I don't tend to do a lot of kind of reading in the fasting realm kind of exclusively anymore. I'm much more looking kind of to nutrition in kind of how to aid nutrition on kind of when we are eating. I've kind of spoken for years about kind of the idea of kind of skipping breakfast and fasting and things like that. And so for me, my kind of topic is now kind of, well, fasting is just something you should be doing. If you're kind of coming across me and my information these days, it's something you're probably already interested in. You've probably done your reading. So now what's important is, like, I think feeding, and people kind of then forget that feeding ourselves is a very important thing. And so we shouldn't forget that, not just kind of focus on the fasting side of things. And so I look to people who are talking some sense and, have some science and research around them, around the nutrition side of things. So someone like Dr. Spencer Nadolsky, who's in the States as well, Alan Aragon. Alan Aragon is probably the most prolific research person I've ever come across. I've been lucky enough to have him on my podcast, and it was one of the best half an hours I've ever been able to have. It was just great to kind of hear people like that, who, I'm a scientist myself, and so I come from a science standpoint, and I want to know that the person I'm speaking to or kind of going to is presenting their information from some sort of research. And science is flawed, absolutely. And a lot of people like to kind of say, oh, look at the holes in that research chart. Yes, I understand there's flaws in it, but it's what we have. And I think it's the best thing we have. And we can't just sit there and listen to our favorite influencer just because it's an opinion they have. Right. I stay well away from people who are just opinion driven. Sure, have your opinions, but you got to be able to back that up somehow. And so, looking to anyone. And I just to kind of, rather than say a specific person, I know I listed two people there, but I would just kind of, when you are looking to kind of do any research or kind of look to people, is that don't be afraid to ask them a question. Is like, have you got research to back up what you've just said? And if that person says, oh, just find it yourself, or it's not something I can get to you now, or, I don't have research for it, then I'd be second guessing what you're reading or what you're hearing from that person. And that's kind of I guess, the point of view I'd like to get across in kind of answering that question of who to look for, or kind of what I look for. And that's kind of where I come from.
Nice. Absolutely. Our final question was about machinery. A lot of people write in asking about ways and levels and things to measure. So there's ketones, there's glucose levels, there's all these different things in machinery that people who get into fasting or try to utilize it for a myriad of different reasons, try to keep control of all of these different levels. What would your advice be for a client that was trying to garner a sense of levels and what those levels mean, or apparatus that you need to buy, from the simple ketone strips all the way up to, glucose measuring armbands that you can get?
Um, I hope I'm all right to say this, but I have a thing called the scale of shit that matters. So at the very bottom, is kind of obviously the thing that holds up all the foundations that hold up the rest of our house. And as we go up that scale of shit that matters, it gets less and less and less important. And I think to the athlete who's trying to get to a gold medal and needs 0.01 second difference to allow them from being a bronze medalist to a gold medalist, or someone at that extreme end, they're already doing all of those foundations. They're exercising well. They're watching their stress levels. They're, all of their food and their nutrition is completely itemized for that. They're doing all of those foundations, that those little things of where's this level of my blood sugar? Where's my recovery at? Like, where's my lactate fresh? Like, all of those different things that you can measure actually make a difference for that person, for their result at the end. But I think for majority of people that 99.99% of the population, they're just not doing the fundamentals, and they're worrying about this 1% thing that could make a difference for 1%, but you've got to put in all this effort just to get that 1%. You can get 85% of your results that you're wanting by just sticking to these fundamentals. And those fundamentals being, make sure you're getting in enough protein. I find a lot of people just aren't getting anywhere enough protein from the day. And that comes from both people who eat animals and who don't eat animals. So whether you're vegan or not, just people aren't getting enough protein. So certainly get enough protein in to help with muscle protein synthesis, or building lean muscle tissue and maintaining it, especially when you're in a weight loss phase. But also looking to getting in enough calories. I think a lot of people are kind of too scared of calories. They hear that word and go, oh my God, calories are the enemy. If I eat something, that's where I put on weight. Our body needs fuel, and so we need to be fueling it enough. And the other big one that I say right is at the bottom of that foundation to kind of build is sleep. People just don't pay enough attention to their sleep. And so make sure you're getting 7 to 9 hours sleep every single day, and then that's quality sleep. If you can get those things right, you won't ever have to worry about ketone strips and watching your blood sugar levels and things like that. But if you do that all right for a year and you're seeing some great results, and you want to kind of flirt with other ideas of how could I get an extra kind of benefit from what I'm already doing here, then sure, going down some of those routes where you can actually measure something. And I always use the term, if you measure something, you can track something. If you track something, you can make a difference with it. And so if you're wanting to make a difference in it, you need to be able to see, well, where's my starting point and where am I now? That's when you could start going down those realms of trying different things that you could kind of actually test where those levels are at. But I'd say for most people listening to this podcast, and I'm just presuming your audience, but they're same as my audience as well, is that just forget all of these things and kind of put your efforts into the things that are going to give you the best return for your value. And that, as I said, is around your nutrition, your sleep, and your protein intake.
Yeah, I concur. I think, and it's sleep is what people just don't speak about enough. It's, it's huge on the list with every psychotherapist I've talked to, but outside of that, I agree. Well, Adam, we are out of I want to say thank you so much for giving us all of your information and your early morning in Australia today. I really appreciate you giving us your time and your expertise.
Not at all. Thank you very much for your time. And yeah, hopefully something I've said has been of some value to your audience.
I have no doubt. And for those of you listening, we have been speaking with Adam Martin. He is an exercise physiologist, weight loss specialist, fasting coach, and author. You can find out more about everything that he does, as well as his book, Start Late, Stay Light, on thenobreakfastguy.com. And thank you for giving us your time today. I appreciate all of you. And until we speak again next time, remember to stay safe, eat responsibly and clean when you do eat, and always bet on yourself. Sluncha.